Milan's shuttle cut through the darkness of space like a silver arrow. He was alone, far from home, guiding his small craft toward a quiet moon at the edge of the Keveris system. The mission was simple: scan the surface for mineral deposits, record data, and return to the main ship. It was not the kind of job that usually brought danger, but space has a way of turning calm into chaos without warning. The first sign of trouble came as a sharp, metallic clang from beneath the shuttle. Milan's eyes darted to the control screen. The words "engine malfunction" flashed in angry red letters. The shuttle shook violently, throwing him forward in his seat. Outside, the black sky swirled with streaks of green lightning and electromagnetic storm forming out of nowhere. "Hold together, just hold together," Milan muttered, gripping the controls. His hands were steady, but his heart beat faster. With each passing second, the shuttle dropped lower toward the moon's surface. The storm's interference scrambled his navigation system. Alarms wailed, and the computer's calm voice repeated, "Warning, collision course detected." Milan didn't have time to plot a safe landing. He aimed for the largest open stretch of land he could see, an area near what looked like a cluster of tall, dark shapes. At first, he thought they were mountains, but as he got closer, he saw they were far too smooth, too even, to be natural dot structures. The ground rushed up to meet him. With a deep breath, Milan engaged the emergency landing sequence. The shuttle slammed into the surface, skidding across rocky soil. Dust filled the air. A piece of the wing tore free and tumbled away. When the shuttle finally stopped, silence fell except for the faint hiss of cooling metal. Milan checked himself. No broken bones, no bleeding, just a bruise forming on his shoulder from the impact. He grabbed his survival pack and opened the hatch. A wave of warm, damp air washed over him. The sky above was a soft green, filled with drifting clouds that glowed faintly from the storm's energy. Strange bird-like shapes wheeled overhead, their wings catching the light. He stepped out, his boots sinking slightly into the soft soil. The air smelled of rain and something sweet, like fruit, in the distance. He saw the tall shapes again. Now that the dust had cleared, he could make them out clearly: massive towers, carved from dark stone, rising into the mist. Between them were walls, bridges, and domes. A city dot, and the city was not empty. Figures were moving along the wall stall, armored beings with long spears that shimmered faintly. Milan froze. His mind raced. First contact protocol said to keep a safe distance until communication could be established, but it was too late for that. The nearest guards had already seen him. 4 of them approached in perfect formation. Their armor gleamed like polished bronze, and their faces were hidden behind smooth masks shaped like the heads of strange animals. Each guard stood well over 2 meters tall. They didn't speak at first, only looked him over, their eyes visible through narrow slits bright with curiosity. Milan raised his hand slowly, palms open to show he meant no harm. "Hello," he said, his voice calm but cautious. "I'm not here to fight. My ship crashed. I just need—" One of the guards stepped forward and tapped the end of his spear against the ground. A deep, musical tone rang out. Without a word, they formed a square around him, guiding him toward the city. Milan's thoughts spun. Was he a prisoner, a guest, or something else entirely? His training told him to observe, look for details. The city gates loomed ahead, carved with patterns of stars, waves, and what looked like a sun breaking through clouds. Beyond them, wide streets stretched out, lined with tall lamps that burned with a steady blue flame. The air was filled with the distant hum of voices and the slow beat of drums. They led him deeper into the city, past crowds of onlookers. The people here were tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered faintly like water under sunlight. Their clothing was rich with colored deep blues, greens, and silvers. Many stopped to stare at him, whispering in a language he didn't understand. Finally, they reached a vast courtyard. At its far end rose a grand palace, its highest spire piercing the low-hanging clouds. The guards marched him inside, through halls lined with banners and lit by floating orbs of light. Everything about the place spoke of great age and power. The doors to the main hall opened. Milan stepped into a space so large it made him feel small. Columns of white stone stretched upward, and the floor was polished to a mirror shine. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat a throne of carved crystal, and upon it was the queen. She was taller than the guards, dressed in flowing silver and green robes that shimmered with each movement. A crown of delicate metal rested on her brow. Her eyes were golden, bright and steady. For a moment, she studied him in silence. Then, without warning, she stood, walked forward and dropped to her knees. The room gasped. Every guard, every court member froze. Milan's heart thudded in his chest. He didn't understand. She bowed her head, her voice soft, but carrying across the hall. "It is you," she said in perfect, unbroken English. Milan blinked. "Me? What are you talking about?" The queen looked up, her golden eyes filled with something between wonder and relief. "The one from the blue star has come." Milan opened his mouth to speak, but found no words. Somewhere in the depths of his mind, 1,000 questions screamed for answers. But the only thing he could think in that moment was, why is a queen kneeling to me? Milan stood frozen, his mind racing. The queen of an alien world knelt before him as if he were someone of great importance. Around them, the grand hall was silent except for the faint sound of banners rustling high above. He glanced at the guards, expecting them to move or speak, but they stood as still as statues. Some seemed shocked, others almost afraid. Milan cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I think there's been a mistake," he said slowly. "I'm just a pilot. My ship crashed. I don't know what you think I am." But before he could finish, the queen rose to her feet with a graceful motion. She studied him carefully, as if trying to memorize every line of his face. "You are from the blue star," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It cannot be a mistake." Milan frowned. "Blue star." She nodded. "The world you call home, Earth." Hearing the name of his planet from her lips sent a shiver down his spine. "How do you know about Earth?" The queen glanced toward one of her advisors, a tall alien with silver markings across his face. He stepped forward and spoke in their own language, his tone respectful yet uncertain. The queen listened, then turned back to Milan. "We have known of your kind for many generations," she explained. "Stories passed down from before my great-grandmother's reign. They speak of a traveler from the blue star who would come when our world stood at the edge of darkness." Milan shook his head. "I'm sorry, but that's not me. I didn't come here to save anyone. I came because my ship broke down." The queen's golden eyes softened, but she did not look disappointed. Sometimes destiny chooses moments we do not expect. Before Milan could answer, the sound of the great doors opening echoed through the hall. More guards entered, carrying a long scroll bound with a silver ribbon. They approached the queen. Bowing deeply before placing it in her hands, she unrolled it, revealing strange symbols painted in gold ink. "This is the prophecy," she said. "It was written hundreds of years ago. It tells of the heir of the first sky, a being whose eyes hold the color of oceans, whose voice carries the truth of 1,000 storms, and whose arrival will bring peace to the shattered worlds." Milan gave a nervous laugh. "Well, I do have blue eyes, but I'm no heir to anything, and I've never even heard of the shattered worlds." The queen stepped closer, her presence calm yet powerful. "And yet, here you stand. The storm brought you to our gates, just as the prophecy said it would." Milan wanted to argue, but a part of him wondered could there be more to this than coincidence? Still, he decided not to get swept up in talk of destiny. "Look," he said gently, "I don't want to cause any trouble. If you can help me repair my ship, I'll be on my way. I promise I won't interfere with your people." The queen tilted her head, studying him as though she were reading something in his expression. Then she gave a small smile. "If you are truly the one, you will prove it. If you are not, then you will simply leave as a guest of the crown." Milan raised an eyebrow. "Prove it? How?" She gestured to the silver-marked advisor. "Cavern will guide you. There are 3 trials. They are not of strength, but of wisdom and heart. If you pass them, your place in our history will be clear." Milan sighed. He wasn't looking for glory, But if doing these trials would convince them he wasn't this heir of the first sky, then maybe they'd let him go. All right, he said. I'll take your trials. The queen nodded. You will begin tomorrow. For now, you will rest. Cavern motioned for Milan to follow. They walked through long, quiet corridors lined with glowing crystal lamps. Servants in flowing robes passed by, some glancing at Milan with open curiosity. Finally, they reached a guest chamber with tall windows overlooking the city. This will be your room, Cavern said. His voice was deep and slow, his words precise. The queen has ordered that you be treated with honor. Food will be brought shortly. You should sleep. The first trial will test your judgment. Milan looked out at the city below. From this high window, he could see the winding streets, the shining towers, and beyond them, the dark forest stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there lay the wreck of his ship. He turned back to Cavern. Do you believe this prophecy? Cavern's silver-marked face was unreadable. Belief is not my duty. My duty is to serve the crown. But I have seen strange things in my life, and your rival is among the strangest. When Cavern left, Milan sank into a chair. A tray of food arrived, strips of golden fruit, soft bread, and a cup of something that smelled faintly of cinnamon. He ate slowly, his mind turning over everything that had happened. Why did the queen speak his language? How could they know about Earth? And what were these shattered worlds she spoke of? Night fell. The city below glowed with thousands of blue lights, and the sound of distant drums rose through the air. Milan lay on the bed, staring at the carved ceiling. He wasn't sure if he believed in prophecy, but he knew one thing for certain: whatever tomorrow's trial was, it would change everything. As sleep pulled him under, a single thought echoed in his mind. I came here by accident, but maybe they're right. Maybe I'm here for a reason. The morning light streamed into Milan's chamber, soft and golden. The city outside was already awake. He could hear the sound of distant bells and the low murmur of voices drifting up from the streets. A knock came at the door. Before Milan could answer, it opened, and Cavern stepped inside. The silver markings on his face caught the light, giving him an almost metallic glow. It is time, Cavern said. Milan rose from the bed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Time for the trial. Yes, Cavern replied. The queen waits in the Hall of Echoes. They walked together through the palace corridors. Servants bowed as they passed, and guards stood at attention, their spears upright and gleaming. Milan noticed that the palace seemed even larger in daylight, its walls covered in murals of stars, oceans, and strange creatures with wings of light. When they reached the Hall of Echoes, Milan stopped in the doorway. The space was enormous, with a domed ceiling that reflected every sound. In the center stood the queen, wearing a robe of deep green embroidered with silver threads. She smiled faintly when she saw him. Good morning, Milan of the Blue Star. He gave a small nod. Morning. So, what exactly is this first trial? The queen motioned to a large circular table behind her. On it sat two objects, a bowl filled with shimmering stones, and a tall crystal jar containing water so clear it looked invisible. This trial, she explained, is called the choice of balance. It is a test of judgment. You will be given a problem faced by our people, and you must decide how to solve it. There is no single right answer, only the truth of your heart. Milan frowned. Sounds like something where I could easily say the wrong thing. The queen's eyes softened. The wrong thing is to say nothing. She gestured, and an elder stepped forward from the shadows. His voice was deep and slow, every word deliberate. In the southern valleys, the elder began, to villages share a single river. This river is their only source of water. In recent seasons, the flow has weakened. The people of one village wish to build a dam to keep water for themselves. The other village says this will destroy their crops and bring hunger. Both sides ask the crown for a decision. What should be done? Milan's brow furrowed. Do they know why the river is weaker? The elder shook his head. We believe it is the storms, but we cannot control them. Milan stepped closer to the table, looking at the stones and the jar. And these, they are symbols. The queen said, if you choose the dam, place the stones into the jar. for they will block the water. If you choose to let the river flow freely, pour the water over the stones, for the river will pass unhindered." Milan stood in silence, thinking. Back home, he had read about conflicts over resources. People often chose what would help their own group, even if it hurt others. But here, he was an outsider's choice could shape how they saw him. He thought about the villages. If one took all the water, the other would suffer. If they shared, both might survive, though with less than they wanted. Finally, he looked at the queen. If the storms are making the river weaker, then a dam might not solve the problem. It could just make people fight more. I say they work together to find another source of water. Until then, they should share what they have equally. The queen's golden eyes glimmered. And what symbol will you choose? Milan picked up the jar of water. Slowly, he poured it over the stones, watching it flow round them and spread across the table. Let the river flow, he said, and teach both villages to adapt. The hall was silent for a moment. Then the elder bowed deeply. Your answer is wise. The queen smiled. You have passed the first trial. Milan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That's it? I thought you'd have me fight some giant beast or climb a mountain. This was more difficult. The queen replied, a sword can cut, but words can shape the future. Cavern stepped forward. The second trial will come tomorrow. Until then, you are free to walk the city. But be cautious, your presence has stirred much interest. Milan raised an eyebrow. Interest? Cavern's tone was careful. Some believe you are the one the prophecy speaks of. Others believe you are a false sign or a threat. That thought stayed with Milan as he left the hall. Later that day, he walked through the city streets. The air was warm, filled with the scent of flowers and the sound of music. Played on stringed instruments, market stalls sold fruits that shone like glass, fabrics that shifted colors as they moved, and small creatures in cages that chirped like birds but had no wings. Children pointed at him, whispering to each other. Some waved shyly, others hid behind their parents. Milan smiled and waved back. But inside he felt uneasy. He didn't want to be seen as something he wasn't. In a quiet corner of the market, he overheard two merchants speaking in the alien language. He didn't understand the words, but their tone was sharp. One of them glanced at him, frowning. A woman beside him noticed his confusion. She was tall, with pale blue skin and gentle eyes. They speak of you, she said in accented English. One says you will bring peace. The other says you will bring war. Milan sighed. Guess I can't please everyone. She gave a small smile. Great changes never please all, but truth will show in time. That evening, Milan returned to the palace. As the sun set, he stood at his window, watching the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere out there, people were deciding whether they trusted him or feared him. He wondered if tomorrow's trial would make things clearer or only more complicated. And far beyond the city walls, in the dark forests, unseen eyes were already watching, eyes belonging to those who had no love for the queen, and even less for strangers from the stars. The next morning, the palace felt different. The air was cooler, and the hallways were quieter, as if the whole building was holding its breath. Milan dressed quickly and waited near the door. Right on time, Cavern arrived. The queen is ready for your second trial, Cavern said. His tone was calm, but his eyes carried a seriousness Milan hadn't seen before. They walked through long stone corridors lit by soft blue lanterns. Servants moved silently along the sides, avoiding eye contact. The palace seemed less welcoming today, and Milan wondered if the growing whispers about him were starting to spread inside these walls. When they entered the queen's audience chamber, she was already standing, her green and silver robe flowing around her like water. At her side stood two advisors, one of whom Milan recognized as the elder from the first trial. Welcome, Milan of the Blue Star, the queen said. Today's trial will test your courage, not the kind found in battle, but the courage to face fear and make choices when the path is unclear. Milan raised an eyebrow. Sounds like yesterday, but harder. The queen smiled faintly. Perhaps you will see. She gestured to a wide set of doors at the far side of the hall. beyond those doors is the Chamber of Shadows. Inside is someone who has been accused of a terrible crime. You must decide what is to be done with them, but you will not know the whole truth at once. You must ask questions and trust your instincts. Milan hesitated. And if I make the wrong choice, then you will fail, the queen said simply. But remember, failure here does not mean death. It means you are not the one the prophecy speaks of. That was a small relief. Still, Milan's stomach tightened as he walked toward the doors. Cavern opened them, and Milan stepped inside. The Chamber of Shadows was dim, lit only by a single shaft of light from a hole in the ceiling. In the center sat a figure bound by silver cords. It was an alien man, tall and thin. His skin a pale shade of gray. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark dot as Milan approached. The man looked up. "You are the one they call the Starborn," he said in a low voice, "and they've sent you to decide my fate." Milan kept his distance. "They say you've been accused of a crime. What did you do?" The man gave a bitter laugh. "They say I stole from the queen's treasury. They say I betrayed my people. Lies, all of it." "Why would they lie?" Milan asked. "Because I speak against them," the man replied. "I tell the people the queen's rule is not perfect, and that frightens her." Milan frowned. This was already more complicated than he expected. "If you're innocent, why not let the queen prove it?" The man shook his head. "Because her court will never believe me. You are not of this world. You could see the truth without their poison in your mind." Milan thought for a moment. "Where were you when the theft happened?" "In my home," the man said. "With my sister." "But no one asked her." "Why not?" "Because they fear what she might say." Milan stepped back, thinking about the first trial. It had been about finding balance and fairness. Maybe this was the same, but with a life at stake. He left the chamber briefly and found Cavern waiting outside. "I need to speak to this man's sister," Milan said. Cavern's expression didn't change, but his tone carried a note of warning. "That is unusual. Most who take this trial decide here and now." "Then I'm not most," Milan replied soon. Milan was led to a small house in the quieter part of the city. Inside, a woman with the same pale gray skin as the accused greeted them nervously. "I am Lyra," she said. "You have come about my brother." Milan nodded. "He says he was with you the night of the theft." Her eyes softened. "Yes, he was here. We shared a meal, then spoke until the moons rose high. He never left." "Would you tell this to the queen?" She looked down. "I would. But the court does not welcome my voice. I am from the outer territories, those far from the capital. To them, we are not to be trusted." Milan felt the weight of her words back on earth. He had seen how people could be judged unfairly simply for where they came from. When he returned to the Chamber of Shadows, he faced the queen. "I've heard enough," he said. She tilted her head. "And your choice?" Milan met her gaze. "Release him. He didn't commit the crime. If you want justice, investigate further. But don't punish an innocent man just because he's easy to blame." The queen studied him in silence for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. "The trial is complete. You have passed." The bound man was freed, his expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Starborn," he said quietly before being led away. That evening, Milan walked the palace gardens, needing air. The flowers here glowed faintly in the dusk, and the sound of water trickling from fountains filled the air. But the peace didn't last. Kav Ren appeared, his face darker than usual. "There's news," he said. "The Queen's scouts have returned with troubling reports. The warlord of the Eastern Plains has begun to move his forces toward the capital." Milan stopped. "Warlord?" Cavern nodded. "His name is Varnik. He has long opposed the Queen's rule, and he sees your rival as a sign of weakness in her court." Milan exhaled slowly. "And I guess this means the third trial might not wait for tomorrow." Cavern's voice dropped. "No, it may come sooner than you think, and it may not be a trial you can walk away from." Far to the east, under a blood-red sky, Varnik's armies marched, and in the shadows of the forest outside the city, strange figures whispered that the prophecy would soon be tested in fire. The palace was restless. Word of the warlord Varnik's movements had spread quickly. Moving through the halls like a cold wind, servants whispered in corners, and guards doubled their patrols. Even the warm glow of the palace lanterns felt dimmer. That night, Milan sat in his chamber, staring out at the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, Varnik's forces were gathering. His mind told him he should be preparing to leave, get back to his ship, repair it, and go home. This was not his fight, but his heart was uneasy. A knock came at the door. Cavern stepped in, his silver markings catching the light. The Queen requests your presence in the War Council. He said. Milan followed him through the corridors to a large round chamber. The Queen sat at the head of the table, surrounded by her generals and advisors. A map was spread out before them, marked with glowing stones that represented armies. Varnik's scouts have been seen near the river crossing, one general reported. If he secures it, he can march on the capital within 2 days. Another general, older and with a deep scar across his cheek, shook his head. We cannot match his numbers in open battle. Our best hope is to fortify the city and hold until his forces tire. The Queen looked up at Milan as he entered. We have not yet decided our course, but I wish to hear your thoughts. Milan blinked in surprise. Me? I'm not a soldier. You have passed the trials, she said. You see things differently than we do. That may be what we need. Milan studied the map. The river crossing was clearly a key point. If Varnik controlled it, the capital would be trapped. But if they tried to fight him there, they could be crushed. He leaned closer. What if we make him think the crossing isn't worth taking? A few generals exchanged puzzled looks. Explain, the Queen said. We could set traps, Milan continued. Flood the lower banks so his soldiers have to move slower. Block the main road with debris. Make him think the city has already cut off supplies. If we make the crossing look like a dead end, maybe he'll split his forces or take a longer route. That will buy you time. The Queen's eyes lit with interest. You speak as one who has planned defenses before. Milan shrugged. Not defenses, just strategy games back home. But it's the same idea. You don't fight where your enemy is strongest. You make them fight where they're weakest. The generals murmured among themselves. One finally said, it may work. If nothing else, it could slow him enough for reinforcements from the western provinces to arrive. The Queen nodded. Then we will prepare the crossing. She looked to Milan. And you will oversee it. Milan raised his hands. Hold on, I'm not trained for. You have already begun to shape our path, the Queen said calmly. Do not stop now. By the next morning, Milan found himself at the river crossing. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth, and the sound of rushing water filled his ears. Soldiers worked quickly under his direction, dragging fallen logs into place, digging channels to let the river spill onto the lower road. He didn't command with shouts like the generals. Instead, he spoke directly to the workers, explaining each step and asking for ideas. Some soldiers seemed surprised that he listened, but soon they began offering clever suggestions of their own. As the sun climbed higher, scouts arrived with news. Varnik's forward units were only a day away. Milan's plan would soon be tested. That night, he stood on the riverbank, watching the water swirl around the traps they had built. Cavern approached, silent as always. You are far from your ship. Cavern said, you could leave now, before the battle begins. Milan glanced at him. And let them face Varnik alone? They faced him before you came. Cavern replied, this is not your world. Milan looked back at the water. No, it's not, but if I run, then everything they said about me being just an outsider will be true. Maybe I'm not the one from the prophecy, but I'm here, and I can help. Cavern studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Then we stand together. The next day, the enemy came. From the ridge above the river, Milan saw Varnik's army stretching across the horizon, a sea of banners and armored warriors. At their head rode Varnik himself, broad-shouldered, with armor black as midnight and a long, curved blade at his side. The enemy slowed as they reached the flooded road. Scouts moved ahead, testing the traps. Some were caught in hidden pits. Others struggled to move through the mud. From his position, Milan saw frustration ripple through the enemy ranks. They began to split, some moving toward the forest paths, others circling for higher ground. The Queen's generals smiled grimly. The delay was working, but then Varnik rode forward. Raising his blade, his voice carried across the water, deep and fierce. "Bring me the Starborn." The soldiers near Milan stiffened. Some looked at him nervously, as if unsure whether to hide him or hand him over. Milan felt the weight of Varnik's gaze even across the distance. The Queen, standing beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "He sees you as the threat. That means your presence matters." Milan swallowed hard, "or it means he's about to come straight for me." The standoff lasted until nightfall. Varnik's army withdrew for the moment, setting up camp on the far side of the river. The Queen's forces held their ground, but everyone knew the fight was only delayed. That evening, in the glow of the campfires, Milan sat with the Queen. "You still have time to return to your ship," she said quietly. "If you go now, Varnik will focus on me, not you." Milan shook his head. "If I go now, he still wins. Maybe not today, but soon, and I'll have to live knowing I could have made a difference." The Queen's golden eyes met his. "Then, tomorrow, we make our stand." Far away, in the dark, Varnik's war drums began to beat a slow, steady rhythm that echoed through the night like the sound of an approaching storm. The dawn broke slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Milan stood at the edge of the riverbank, watching as the Queen's soldiers prepared for battle. The air was tense, filled with the scent of wet earth, burning wood, and steel. Varnik's army had not moved during the night, but their campfires glowed like embers across the river, and Milan could hear the faint clamor of weapons. As his mind replayed every strategy he had considered, the Queen approached, her green and silver robe flowing in the morning breeze. "The time has come," she said calmly. "We fight today, not just for the city, but for the safety of our people." Milan nodded. "And if we don't win," she smiled faintly, "then we learn, adapt, and try again." Courage is not knowing victory is certain, it is choosing to face what comes anyway. The battle began with a sudden roar. Varnik's soldiers charged through the forest paths, thinking the river would slow the defenders. Milan had anticipated this. Hidden trenches and mud traps slowed the advance, causing confusion among the enemy ranks. Some soldiers fell into the pits, while others became mired in the thick mud. Unable to move quickly, Milan ran along the river bank, directing soldiers to cover weak points. He didn't fight like the Queen's soldiers, who trained with their long spears and swords instead. He used quick thinking and clever tactics, blocking one path to force enemies into another, moving groups to flank them, and using the environment to his advantage. The Queen noticed his presence on the battlefield and nodded to her generals. "He sees what we cannot," she said. "The humans truly are different." Milan ducked as a stone flew past his head, and he spotted a group of enemy soldiers trying to cross the river using a fallen log. He quickly ordered to teams to cut branches and create barriers, forcing the soldiers to turn back. In moments like this, he felt the rhythm of the battle, the constant need to adapt and think ahead. Hours passed, the sun climbed high, and sweat dripped from Milan's brow. Varnik's forces were larger and stronger, but they were predictable. They relied on numbers and brute force. Milan, along with the Queen's troops, relied on creativity, observation, and teamwork. From a small hill, he noticed a narrow path along the river's edge that Varnik's scouts had ignored. "If we lead a small group along this path," he told the Queen's general, "we can flank his right side and cut off their archers. It will force Varnik to divide his forces." The general hesitated. "It is risky." If I fail, we adapt again," Milan said. "It's the only way." The Queen nodded. "Do it." Milan led a small squad of soldiers along the narrow path, moving silently. The enemy had not expected an attack from that direction. With careful timing, they struck the flank, forcing Varnik's archers to retreat. Chaos spread through the enemy lines as soldiers tried to regroup. Back at the main riverbank, the Queen saw the shift in the battle. The humans' tactics confused them, she said. We can win this. Milan returned to the river crossing. Coordinating with soldiers on both sides, he directed reinforcements where they were needed, instructed archers to hold fire until the enemy was in position, and encouraged those who were unsure. He didn't have the skill of the trained soldiers, but he had something equally powerful, the ability to see possibilities others missed. Varnik realized too late that his army was in disarray. He rode forward, his black armor shining in the sun, his voice carrying across the battlefield. Starborn, show yourself. Milan stepped into view, his heart pounding but his mind steady. He had no weapon like Varnik's massive sword or armor, but he had courage and quick thinking. He shouted orders, moving the troops in clever formations, using the terrain to shield his allies while creating obstacles for the enemy. Varnik's soldiers tried to reach him, but each path was blocked or redirected. For the first time, the warlord's confidence wavered. Hours turned into the late afternoon. Varnik's army had been slowed, split, and forced into mistakes. Milan saw the exhaustion on their faces. The queen rode beside her soldiers, inspiring them with calm authority. But it was Milan's human insight that made the difference. Finally, Varnik realized that the battle was lost. His forces were trapped between the river and the forest, with no easy escape. He raised his hand in surrender, his black blade lowered. The queen approached, flanked by her generals. You see now, she said to Milan, her voice carrying over. The field, that courage, wisdom, and heart are as powerful as any sword. Milan breathed heavily, his uniform covered in mud and dust. It's not about me, he said quietly. It's about everyone working together. We can only win when we think and act as one. The queen smiled. And that is why you are remarkable, perhaps not because of prophecy, but because of humanity itself. When the battle ended, the soldiers cheered. Varnik's forces retreated, leaving the queen's city untouched. Milan walked through the aftermath, helping soldiers tend to the wounded and clearing debris. Cavern appeared beside him. You have changed the outcome, Starborn. Without your insight, we would have lost many more lives. Milan shook his head. I just thought differently. That's all humans do. We don't always follow what seems normal. We find another way. The queen approached, her golden eyes warm. Today, you showed that humans are capable of more than even we imagined. You have earned not only our respect but our trust. Milan felt a strange pride, but it was tempered with humility. He had not sought glory, only to help where he could. And yet, in doing so, he had made a difference. That evening, Milan looked out at the city from the palace balcony. Fires were being lit for celebration, but he knew the peace would not last forever. There were still other challenges, other forces beyond their world that might test them again. But for now, the city was safe, and Milan understood something new about himself and humanity. Courage and intelligence, when combined with compassion, could turn the tide even against impossible odds. The queen knelt briefly before him once more, not out of fear, but respect. You are welcome here, Milan of the Blue Star. Always? Milan smiled faintly. Thank you, but my home is still far away. And yet, she said, you came here when we needed you most. That is enough to make history. As the stars began to shine above the palace, Milan realized that he had not only changed the outcome of a battle, he had proven that humans, even far from home, could make a difference in worlds beyond their own. The city was calm in the early morning. Smoke from fires had cleared, leaving a clean, crisp air. Birds with bright plumage chirped in the gardens, and the faint scent of blooming flowers drifted through the streets. Milan walked along the palace terrace, thinking about everything that had happened. The battle with Varnik was over. The queen's city had been saved, thanks to his strategy, quick thinking, and courage. Yet, Milan could not shake the thought of his home, his broken ship, and the long journey back to Earth. Cavern approached silently, as always. The council wishes to honor you today, he said. The queen requests your presence in the Hall of Stars. Milan nodded. He had faced trials, danger, and battles, but this ceremony felt different. It was not about testing him, but about recognizing what he had done. The Hall of Stars was magnificent. Its ceiling sparkled with crystals shaped like stars, and soft light reflected across the polished floors. At the center stood the queen, flanked by her council and generals. The people of the city had gathered to watch. Milan stepped forward. The queen's golden eyes met his, and she spoke with calm authority. Milan of the Blue Star. She began, "You came to our world not as a conqueror, not as a ruler, but as one willing to help when we needed it most. You faced trials that tested your wisdom, your courage, and your heart, and through each, you have proven something remarkable." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Humans, we have learned, are capable of greatness beyond what we imagine. They adapt, they think differently, they inspire those around them. You have shown this to us, Milan. You are not only the starborn of prophecy, you are a symbol of hope." Milan felt a warmth spread through him, a mix of pride and humility. He bowed slightly. "I did what I could. I just tried to help." The queen smiled. "And that is enough. You have taught us a lesson we will never forget. Your choices saved lives and united our people." After the ceremony, the queen led Milan to the palace gardens. The soft sunlight fell on the trees and fountains, making the crystal leaves sparkle. "You have a choice," she said gently. "You may stay here, with honor, and become a guide for our people, or you may return to your world and continue the journey you began before destiny brought you here." Milan looked down at his hands. He loved the city, the people, and the queen's trust, but his heart was still on Earth. "I need to go back," he said finally. "My ship is still waiting, and there are people back home who will worry if I don't return." The queen nodded. "Then go, knowing that your legacy here will last. Your wisdom and courage have changed our world. Even when you are gone, the seeds you planted will grow." The next day, Milan returned to the crash site with the help of the queen's engineers. They had repaired his ship faster than he expected, using materials stronger than anything he had seen on Earth. The engines hummed to life, bright and steady, as the alien engineers stepped back, watching Dot before he boarded. The queen appeared once more. She extended her hand. "Thank you, Milan," she said simply. "You are always welcome here." Milan shook her hand firmly. "And thank you, Your Majesty. I will never forget this world, or your people." As the ship lifted off, Milan looked down at the city below. From this height, he could see the winding streets, the towers, and the gardens that had become a symbol of hope and courage. Soldiers, citizens, and even the freed villagers waved as he ascended. He felt a strange mixture of sadness and pride. He had left his world behind for a short time, but in doing so, he had made a difference in another. He realized something important. Being human was more than living on one planet. It was about thinking, caring, and acting with heart wherever life took you. Above him, the stars stretched endlessly. Milan set a course for Earth, but he knew he would carry this adventure in his mind forever. He had seen what humans could do, not just on his world, but across the galaxy. Weeks later, back on Earth, Milan walked through the familiar streets of his city. Everything looked the same: cars moving along busy roads, children playing in parks, people hurrying to work. Yet, he felt different. The lessons from the alien world stayed with him. Courage could be quiet. Wisdom could come from simple ideas. And even one person could change the outcome of great events. He visited his ship, now repaired fully, and made preparations for his next journey. He didn't know where it would take him, but he no longer feared the unknown. He had seen other worlds, faced impossible challenges, and learned that humanity could rise to meet them. Late at night, Milan looked up at the stars. He thought of the queen, the soldiers, the villages he had helped, and even Varnak, who had challenged them to fight and adapt. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "We are capable of more than we know, and we can make a difference wherever we go." In the distance, he imagined the alien city under the warm light of its twin moons, the people safe, the queen still guiding them, and his name remembered as the human who had turned prophecy into reality. Milan realized that destiny wasn't about being chosen, it was about choosing to act. And he had chosen wisely. With a final glance at the stars, he boarded his ship. Engines humming, he lifted into the sky, heading toward new adventures. Carrying with him the lessons of courage, wisdom, and heart, the galaxy was vast. The challenges many, but Milan felt ready. Humans had the power to face the unknown, to inspire, and to protect, and wherever he went next, he would continue to show that even one human could make a difference in worlds beyond imagination. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and Milan of the Blue Star flew toward them, ready to leave his mark wherever destiny led.